Good afternoon here from Las Vegas Federal Court, down here in Las Vegas. We're in just a quick break here for lunch, and we have some new questions for the jurors here when we get back. So I'm going to go over those questions that we're fixing to read to the jurors here shortly, kind of give you a little bit of insight on what the jurors are seeing in this last testimony with Agent Willis. This is supposedly the government's last witness. The government still wants the rest of the day until tomorrow morning to decide if they're going to arrest. But they told us as of yesterday that this was their last witness, but they still need a little bit more time. They did this in the last case. What I've noticed with this prosecution team is that they drag it on and on and on. Not quite like happened in Portland, Oregon with the trials over there. This prosecution team seems to never want to let go and give up. They are always afraid that the defense team is going to bring in just a little bit more. Every time they get done with cross-examinations, they have just a little bit more to say, and it just continues to go on. So hopefully tomorrow the defense team will be bringing in their first witnesses. Yesterday the judge seemed concerned that they were not prepared to have witnesses today, and the defense said, well, they didn't know what the government had plans, so they didn't plan on any witnesses till tomorrow. And now it looks like we're still not going to be quite over with till tomorrow. We had looks like 8 jurors that asked questions. Some of them had multiple questions a day again, and some of the most interesting ones that caught my attention today was from one juror. It was juror question 126, and that question was, how many women, children, and media, and people with guns that did you count? They want that question answered. It hasn't been answered yet. We've got a little insight on what is going to be answered to this agent. And so here right after lunch, we are going to hopefully get some of these answered. One question that the judge and the prosecutors are not going to allow to be answered today out of all these questions is, why did the FBI get involved? What part or role are they playing here? And these are BLM officers that are taking the cows, not the FBI. So why is the FBI involved? And the judge said she's not going to allow this FBI agent to answer that question. There was multiple defendants that want to know, multiple jurors that want to know about this gap that is in the bridge. Why is this? How big is this gap? Can you actually get a gun in there? Does it go all the way through? Multiple ones want to know if this gap is actually in line with the BLM. As we know, and one juror even asked, are the bridge perpendicular, parallel to each other, and do they actually line up with that wash area? Which we know they don't. That bridge actually turns slightly, it's the northbound bridge, turns slightly to the south, and it does not actually line up with the wash. So that crack in that bridge, and I've been out there multiple times myself looking at this, so from the experience of myself being out there, a gun will not go through there and turn in that little crack in the bridge and turn that way. That gap is only 2 inches wide at the biggest part of the gap and goes down to 1.5 inches. So these are some of the questions we're going to be asking FBI agent Willis from the jurors. We're hoping to get some of these answered, and we'll see if the government objects. We'll also see if the government decides to bring one more witness. We don't think they will, but they're wanting to wait till tomorrow morning to decide that. Yes.
I want you to tell them why they're not going to ask the FBI questions.
Why they're not going to ask the FBI questions about this one question here?
The one that they're not going to ask, it was based on the fact that it is not relevant for the jury to know anything.
That's true. Yeah. They keep bringing up this relevance issue.
Relevance.
It's not relevant. It's not relevant for the jurors to know all this information. Some of this, it isn't part of the case. It isn't part of the conspiracy. So they're not going to bring this up and let the jurors know why the FBI is involved at all in this case. It seems like it is to me that all this truth should come out so they can hear it all. But they're not going to let the jurors know the reason why the FBI is involved here. The jurors have had awesome questions all along the way here. It's gave us a big insight on what these jurors are thinking. I know if I was a juror, I would want some of these questions answered, and I would want to know more in depth why things are being beat around the bush and things are not allowed to be answered in this case. And so overall, it has seemed like some very good questions that has been brought up. One thing I don't know if got brought up yesterday, it was just a point of interest for all of us that was observing in court, but pretty much 12 of the jurors had red on, or some form of red. 12 of the 15 jurors had bright red or pink on. 2 of them had more like a flowery type, and a little bit of red or pink in those flowers, but it looked like they was almost dressing alike. I know that Redoubt News brought this out in an article, and that they wanted to, it was a point of interest, and they wanted to have this question answered also. And the defense team brought this up, and they wanted to know why the jurors were dressed in all red. And they wanted to ask them jurors them questions. And the judge denied them that right, said that it would be embarrassing to the jurors, and they have a right to wear anything they want to wear. They have a right to talk about what they want to wear and dress alike if they want to for some occasion or whatever. And she denied the defense team the right to know why these jurors were teaming up, dressing alike, putting on like clothing of each other. And that question did not get brought up to the jurors either, and we still don't know why the jurors showed up yesterday morning in mostly red clothes or uniforms. This case looks like it's going to be wrapping up for the government. What's that?
I got more for you.
Go ahead. I know you had a whole bunch about it.
Do you know what today's color is? Today's color is black.
Is it? I noticed it was kind of a dull color.
But the beauty about it is not just the jury that is majority black, but the entire defense side is in black or dark gray.
Wow.
Including defendants and their attorneys and
I noticed
everybody helping.
It was real dark and dull in there today for all the clothing.
Today's color is black. It's just amazing.
And the one marshal yesterday that guides the jurors around had a red tie on.
Yes.
So the marshal even matched the jurors yesterday. So, yeah.
I hope I don't steal your thunder here.
No, I don't have much more to say.
Okay. One of the questions, I think it was the very last question from the jury, was a question towards the FBI agent. Did he Photoshop any of the pictures?
That's a good question. That was one of the questions by the jurors.
That was one of the questions, that the FBI had Photoshopped any of those pictures. When I'm sitting right next to a U.S. Marshal, he turns around, looks at me and goes, just like that. So what's happening is the jury is not buying the government's narrative at all. Remember when she said they could even see a firearm on you, the FBI or the BLM, if they could even see a firearm on you when you're protesting, it was that you have assaulted that officer. Well, that obviously has gone right out the window, and they're very concentrating on one thing. What could Eric Parker actually see through that Jersey barrier? Now, in case anybody hasn't heard this yet, I have the exact same rifle. That barrel will not go through the Jersey barrier. It's at least 12 inches. So if you turn it to the left and turn it to the right, you're going to shoot concrete. You have a very narrow, and that's
we've got a new mantra on that question. We've got something just for you guys, given by one of our supporters up here. The question where they want to know the range of...
Yes.
Okay. If it doesn't swivel, it means acquittal.
Yeah.
There you go. Start saying it.
That's
if it
right.
doesn't swivel, it means acquittal.
That's right.
If you look at the broom,
Yes.
and if you look at the actual angle of the opening, it's about 30 degrees off. Okay, that's something I know as a sheet metal technician with a sheet metal contractor's license. It's about 30 degrees off, which means if he actually even tried to signal that direction, his barrel is going to be pointing at concrete.
in this demonstration, instead of using an actual gun in this demonstration, in this Jersey barrier, putting a gun in there, they used a broom.
Big long
handle broom, not a short little stubby gun like some of the guys had out there when they were protesting. They had a long handled broom that they stuck through there. There's no photos at all with a gun sticking through the Jersey barrier.
And what's interesting about that is one of the BLM agents testified at one time, and in his official report, that he could see the shadow of the barrel sticking out, which is ridiculous because it's a lot easier to see the barrel than to see the shadow. And he later admitted that his report was inaccurate. And of course, we went out there, Sherry Duvall and I with Readout News, we went out there and actually did some videos of it. And you can see that is just totally ridiculous. Now again, let me just summarize what I was saying. That barrel's about 5, maybe 6 inches long. Then you hit the forearm. That thing's like 1.5 feet where he's poking through that Jersey barrier. It means he's about 12 inches short of going through the Jersey barrier.
That's exactly right. One of the final questions that the jurors have is, did Ricky Loveland point a gun at an officer? Are there any photos? There are none of Ricky Loveland pointing any weapons at anybody. And so we have some awesome questions here. We're hoping to get these answered by Agent Willis. It looks like, again, this is the last government witness, and hopefully by tomorrow we will be going into witnesses for the defense side, and hopefully the government will rest in the morning. We should have a full update here after court. It looks like it's going to be a short day for court today. We're not 100% sure, but that's the way it looks, and I'm sure Andrea will have you a full update here right after we get out of court here just this afternoon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Have a good day and keep praying for us down here. Get down here and join us the next few days. The next week and a half is going to get really exciting down here, listening to the witnesses that the defense brings in. And the big question is the judge going to allow all these witnesses this time? Is she going to try to find some way to stop it? And so let's pray they don't. Let's pray these witnesses get in there. Let's pray these defendants are strong and can testify and take the stand themselves. And we need a lot of prayers. We need a lot of supporters down here. Now is the time, if ever, to get down here and support these families and support these defendants down here in the courtroom and outside. We need all the support we can get. Thanks again, and we will see you here sometime when we're getting out of court here this afternoon at some point. Thank you again.
All right, so I just came down. They're still upstairs arguing witnesses and who's going to be allowed to testify and who's not. I'm going to go through and do the entire day update. We came back with cross-examination of Special Agent Joel Willis. Marchese got up there and pointed out that Eric doesn't have his 3% of Idaho tattoo at the time of the Bundy Ranch. He states that you had 270 in the wash and only 29 officers. Did you count the officers on the northbound bridge? No, they did not. Were there any officers on the southbound bridge? He can't even answer that, or refuses to answer that. And then he did not count any officers on the southbound bridge. Did you count any officers at Post 1? You're counting all of the protesters in the wash, protesters on both bridges to up that number. But they say only 29 officers. 29 officers down in the wash. That doesn't account the Metro officers. That doesn't account Nevada Highway Patrol. That doesn't account anyone at Post 1, where a lot of the Metro and SWAT and all of those people were. It doesn't account anyone at the ICP either. So what they're trying to do is, once again, they're trying to make this number seem a lot bigger. They also said 400 and something, and they were counting people off of pictures. So they were counting people on a bridge at one time, and then people in the wash at a different time. What if those people at the bridge went down into the wash? What if the people under the wash went up to the bridge? Are those people counted multiple times? Probably so. Then he shows the video of Todd Engel, and he said, Todd Engel spoke of gun battles that were going to pursue the day of everyone arrested. When Eric was arrested, were there any gun battles? No, there wasn't. Then he was asked about the northbound and southbound bridge being at the same angle, and that the terrain hasn't changed in the last 3 years. That there were bushes and trees, erosion of the road. He said, no, this hasn't changed that much in the last couple years. 209 is a picture he took, he said, months ago in March. This is where he puts the broom in there. He was asked about erosion of the asphalt road underneath. I can tell you, I've been down there. I've seen chunks of the asphalt fall down into the stand. Yes, there is erosion every time it rains here. Water goes through that area, and that asphalt is put on top of really soft sand, and it is eroding away amazingly. So for them to say that is ridiculous. Then they asked about the size of the broomstick, which is about 1.5 inch to 2 inches in diameter. And about higher in the crack, you can maneuver better than lower in the crack. Then it was asked, here's a picture, can you see Mr. Parker's weapon protruding on the other end? Obviously, this broom that is much longer than the weapon through the entire crack is going to have more mobility than his weapon that could maybe go in this much to this much before it's hit. So go and look at that picture and tell me how much of that weapon is actually inside that crack, and that if your barrel is in that crack, if you'll be able to move it around and shoot. Even if you were able to angle it this way, would it not shoot right directly into the concrete, and then you're practically shooting yourself? Then the picture's brought up, the picture of Eric Prone, and they guesstimate about how much Eric's eyes are off the ground and then away from the crack being at the end of his weapon. And then the fact that they never took a photo from those angles through the crack. Leventhal gets up. He says, you put yellow boxes with names in these pictures. Do you have any info that Drexler was in communication with any of these people? And he brings up the picture that has Ryan Payne and Dave Bundy with the little boxes. Then the same thing for Engel. Did Drexler communicate with Engel? They brought in the Stuart Rhodes video, Ammon Bundy. Were they Facebook friends? Did they have communications over phone, recordings? No. None of this time. So then he starts showing the picture of the bridge, and he's like, do you know this person with the tan hat? This person that's obviously with media that has a pad of paper and writing down. Did you? And he says, well, I was only to focus on the people with guns. And there was an objection to relevance. He continues his line of questioning about other people, people with long cameras, people that could be confused of having a gun from that distance. Another objection of relevance and argumentative. So basically, they don't want him to be allowed to ask any of those questions. He's only allowed to ask questions about what Scott Drexler, Eric Parker, Stephen Stewart, or Ricky Loveland did. Then he shows a big tree in front of the agents, and behind the tree they're backing up. So they show the truck backing up, they do the screenshot, but all of the agents are behind a big tree. This is the kind of stuff that they're putting on inside. They are trying to hide every picture of these officers. All the evidence is not being allowed in. So they brought that still from 29A and start playing the video. They play the video and it has a little bit of the audio in it, and the government objects. It says they never admitted the audio. So here we have once again that they're omitting a little tiny bit of evidence as possible without audio, even though there's audio on there. That was objected to, and he had to move on. He was able to lay down, they talked about the pictures that he took were misleading with the broom, being able to go all the way through. I'm sorry if some people are having trouble with this. You'll have to go back after it's posted. It's always had an issue down here at the courthouse. If I have too much of an issue, I will repost another one later on where I go through it all again. So then we go into the jury questions. Jury question number 120. Why are others with guns not labeled? He said he was focusing this case on the defendants who are in trial that posed a threat to law enforcement. There was immediately an objection and move to strike that. They did strike that comment, but he still was able to say that in front of the jury. If the defense had done something like this, we would have been stipulated to something else and had to give something else to the prosecution. The prosecution has done this time and time again, and they keep getting away with it. Yes, it was stricken from the record. No, the jury still was able to hear it. Based on the cap, how many degrees from side to side could a weapon move? He's saying 20 degrees. Based on if you put that broom in that gap, you could move it 20 degrees. First off, that's not possible. There's no way it can move 20 degrees side to side. Secondly, once again, the broom is protruding to the other end. So you could have more mobility if the weapon is pointing out the other end. If it's not, your only mobility is going to be right into concrete, and it's going to be an unsafe fire. Okay, so The next question, will the exhibit list be provided to the jury? Yes. Question number 122, I'll get to that later. They refused to ask that. It was too damning of a question, so they weren't going to ask that in front of the jury. Number 124, what was the reason to have the FBI surveilling the area? That's not relevant, so they didn't even ask the question. If the BLM, or these are the questions that they did answer. If the BLM was in charge of the ICP, what point did the FBI get involved? Of course, they don't want to answer this question because we know that they got involved way before the BLM even got involved. They were involved since January, and the BLM and the roundup started in April. Okay, now 125. How much lateral movement, side to side, with the barrel? He's saying once again 20 degrees, and that the field of movement could be greater depending on if the barrel of the weapon was smaller than the barrel or the broomstick. He also said he doesn't know how wide the barrel was, even though they presented Eric Parker's weapon as evidence upstairs. So you have the evidence, you pull it out, you're playing around with it, but you say you don't know what the diameter of the barrel is, when it's quite easy to just go get that weapon out of evidence. You had it in the courtroom a couple days ago and measure it. So what they're doing here is diversion tactics, distract. They're trying to make sure, smoke and mirrors, and give the wrong answers. Let me also bring this up. Everyone, before lunch, everyone's like, oh, they read the jury questions in front of the whole group. And they were so excited that they did that, and it was a good thing, right? Well, let me explain why they did that. They did that because Agent Willis is allowed to sit in the courtroom and listen to all those questions. Then he can spend his entire lunch writing misleading answers to those questions so that he gets to hear those questions an hour before he has to even answer them. Oh, yeah, that's a great thing, right? That's exactly why this Agent Willis has been on the stand 2 times in this trial for almost 3 days. They also talked about vertical movement. And he said vertical wouldn't change, even though, yes, vertical would change, being able to point it downward. Because nobody cares if you could point it upward from the bridge, but being able to point it downward. Once again, another misdirected answer. Why didn't you take support for the range finding experience? He said he was out there 6+ times, and that he had 1 to 5 people with him when he went. But he didn't have anyone when he went to take the pictures. How convenient. Doesn't this sound like government bureaucracy? They take enough people when they have nothing to do, but when it really counts, they don't take enough people.
Here's everybody coming out. It's over.
Did you calibrate the rangefinders? He said, well, he didn't even talk about the first rangefinder that he took, and then the second one was brand new, and he asked the store employees and found no reason to calibrate something that was brand new other than to send it back to the manufacturer and have them make sure it's calibrated. Then he was asked if he used GPS. He did not have access to that type of equipment. Oh, really? No access to GPS equipment? That seems like bullshit. I'm sorry that I'm cussing, but it is bullshit. They tell me that they don't have access to GPS equipment when they do have access to all of that kind of stuff. Are the bridges exactly parallel? He says yes. He says yes to that. Can you believe that? Anyone who's been out there knows there's an offset. They brought up Stephen Stewart posted on Facebook that they pushed forward, but they remained stationary on the bridge. He said, yes, that is true, but they were not in the wash and they were not stationary. They ran away and then they came back and brought a backpack with water. Oh my, they went and got a backpack and some water because they'd been in the hot sun for an hour.
Oh no, not backpacks again.
Yeah, so, and then they said, did you observe Ricky Loveland pointing at a weapon at any time? No, so that was good for Ricky. Another question, 410 people in the wash, so how many of them were women? How many were children? How many were media, and how many were armed? He did not count the different groups, but he knows that there were 41 armed. And 26 of them were in the wash and everyone else was on the bridge, and they didn't have a number for militia either. Mr. Willis testified that the upper part of the gap, vertical to the right, it veers to the right in the photos, but did not show that. Is it correct? He muddies this up, so we are all confused about this. Number 2, so would one have a wider view at the bottom? He says yes, even though in direct examination he testifies at the very bottom, you have the least visibility as possible. Would the bottom stick would be able to move more freely at the bottom of the gap? Yes, he says once again yes, even though in the pictures he testified there's about this much that is this narrowest part. Okay, so 127, based on your review, did Scott or Steve have any direct communication with anyone that rallied for or organized a Bundy protest before the date in question. He says he doesn't recall. But Stephen Stewart and Scott Drexler traveled to Nevada with Eric Parker, and that would infer that they all communicated together, even though the question said other than the defendants. And so once again, here he is muddling up the answers so that the jury is confused based on the questions. And he said he ended up going back and forth, and the answer was no. They asked about the times and dates. He couldn't even give exact times and dates, and when he went back out there and took pictures of the wash, what times, what dates, what time of day. Oh, of course, that evidence is irrelevant. You know, as government employees, you don't really actually need to get the evidence. You don't need times or dates or anything like that. I would think, you know, working in management and everything you can write down, everything you can mark up is important. Time, date, all of these different measurements. Well, what I think the government has done here is they have erased any type of evidence that goes to prove anything other than the guilt of these guys, and they're just going to show what they want to show. So the government redirect says that there was many times that Ricky Loveland wasn't on film, and that there's times that you cannot account for him, and he talks about that. Marchese gets up and says, so the question to the line of sight, that 20 degree, that's a guess, right? And you talked about the bridges being parallel, yet when you're with your rangefinder, there's 7 feet of difference between the ground of each bridge. You labeled people with gun and said you were focusing, this is Leventhal, you labeled people with guns, said you were focusing on people from this case. Brings back up the picture that has Ryan Payne and Dave Bundy and Ryan Bundy pictured. And the judge and the prosecution says this is misleading. The judge says this is misleading. Leventhal says, if you like a sidebar, I think that it's the other way around, that his answer to that question is misleading, and if we'd like to have a sidebar. The judge wouldn't even allow him that sidebar. They just made him move on from that. He said his response was misleading and not the other people. Then he goes to ask about the media question and about how many armed and how many are militia. Once again, the prosecution says he's being misleading. He says, once again, they're the ones being misleading, and this agent is answering the questions misleadingly. Then there was a question, do you know if any of these photos were enhanced or any of the pictures or videos were enhanced? And he said, no, the FBI never enhanced anything. But he said, are you sure that any of these pictures or videos weren't enhanced or photoshopped before you got them? Because you're pulling pictures off of Facebook, you're pulling pictures off of media sources, you're getting pictures from who knows where, nobody even knows who actually took those photos. So there is no way for him to say that he knows for sure that those photos weren't enhanced. Tomorrow, they're starting the day at 10 a.m., and the jury won't even be back until 1.
No, they're not coming back at all.
The jury's not coming back at all tomorrow, and I will explain this to you. The defense, the judge tries to get the defense to give their 29A motions before the government has officially wrapped up their case, has officially finalized their case. Now let me explain this to you. A 29A motion. This is the motion where the government has to prove all of these different crimes. And if they fail to prove one of these crimes, the charges should be dropped from here before the defense even goes. That's what a 29A motion is. If they failed to prove the conspiracy charges should drop here. By the judge trying to get the defense to give their 29A motions today before the government has finalized their case, that leaves the door open for the government to go home tonight, get any evidence that they want to continue these charges. So here again, the judge is showing her bias and working as a prosecutor. She is saying, give us your 29A, and the defense is like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to give it to you until the government says they have finalized their case, and then we'll give you our 29A. We are not going to leave this open for you. So then we go right into the witnesses. We have Patricia Kent that's supposed to be testifying tomorrow. They talk about what her testimony is going to be, and then the judge decides that she's not going to be allowed to testify. But she can come in and proffer and get it on the record, which is extremely important. So anyone coming to testify for this, that you're feeling that it's not going to make a difference, it really does make a difference for appeals. So please still come. We need you to come. We need it on the record. We need you to come in and proffer, even though the jury will not hear your testimony. By the end of the day, I had to get up and leave. Dennis Michael Lynch is supposed to be second via Skype. I had to leave because they're going to make him proffer as well and not going to let his testimony go in front of the jury. In fact, as everyone comes down, there will be no testimony given in front of the jury as I hear it right now. And let's see if they'll even allow Eric Parker to take the stand. Last time we had three witnesses. And we thought, oh, we got a good defense. Everyone's saying, oh, we're waiting to come show support for the defense, right? Well, guess what? There isn't going to be any. We don't get a defense. Last time we had three witnesses, one of them being Eric Parker. Let's see if they'll even allow Eric Parker on the stand right now. I'm still hopeful that we'll have a hung jury, but what's going to happen now that we get a hung jury? They're going to come back, no jury questions, and
engineer the jury.
Engineer us even worse. They stacked the jury. They prevented our defense. They have done everything in their possible will to make sure that these guys get guilty. And if they don't do it here and there's a hung jury, although with the jury questions today, it sounds like it's really good for Ricky Loveland. It's really good for Stephen Stewart. It might even be okay for Scott Drexler. But the jury questions didn't seem so great for Eric Parker. It looks like they've already probably found him guilty of at least one thing. And we know what's going to happen if they find him guilty of even one thing. Even one thing, they're going to send him away for 18 to 20 years, just like Todd Engel. More time than a murderer or a rapist would do. And that's all happening upstairs. This is over. Everyone needs to understand that this is done. We will be back here tomorrow. The jury won't even be here. If you want to come watch the railroading and be a witness to this, be my guest. It would have been great to have some more people. I
think it's important to be here tomorrow, have all of this tomorrow. You never know who's going to drive by tomorrow who's not scheduled to be here. So make sure
I do want to say we had a few new people. We had some people that came all the way from Carson City. That's amazing. Thank you so much. We had another person from Las Vegas. She gets up and starts work at 2 in the morning. And then she's had a hard time coming down here, but she decided that she was going to make it a long day for herself and come down here today. And that kind of support is amazing. It really helps to have these people that are in Las Vegas that can make it down here is so important. It is so important, and I hope that more people, I hope people from Camp Liberty will actually come down here and sit in the courtroom with us. Thank you all so much.
Well, I'm going to try and do an update here. Wait till a few people get on. Dang it, it looks like I got a tree branch fell on my vehicle here in this stupid parking lot. Dang. Okay, I got one person, so I will get started. We were waiting outside of the courthouse, trying to live stream our defendants coming out, but I think they got the word that we were out there waiting, and we waited a long time, and they never did come out, so they're probably holding them in there till we leave, or they went out some other direction. I don't know. I think they're holding them in there till we leave. But anyhow, I'd like to give a live update on what happened today. I know Andrea Parker did a fantastic job. My perspective has always seemed slightly different than hers, but it was crazy. They're kind of going over the ground rules after the defendants had left and after the jurors had left, and there's so many lies that are just going on continuously. One of them was, here's what's amazing. They're not allowing the defense, they're not allowing the defendants to defend themselves against the armed BLM, saying that they had to defend themselves. They're not going to allow that. And the judge actually said she made a mistake the first time in allowing that in. And she said more or less that we cannot take at face value when a law enforcement officer points the gun at you, points a firearm at you, and tells you he's going to shoot you. Okay? Even when he gives an unlawful order, you have no right to defend yourself. Well, then I guess we're not supposed to take them at face value when they scream at us and tell us they're going to shoot us if we don't do such and such. She even went and said, hell, they didn't even arrest anybody. Okay? Now, is that an admission that there were some unlawful orders given there? No. Where it goes back to is the demonstration area and the crowd. Well, the government maintained that the crowd was hostile, and they even, quoted, the defense quoted the FBI in some of the, and not just them, but also on the stand, some of the police officers there with Gillespie talked about how the mood and tenor of the crowd changed the more Cliven talked, and it became hostile. It became threatening, all right? So, and all these people in the crowd, according to the government, are unindicted co-conspirators, all right? But they have no right, any single person in there has no right to protect the rest from an unlawful order. When the BLM said, disperse or we will use lethal force, pointing guns at the crowd, that is no defense for the four defendants. I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but the four defendants can't maintain defense of anybody else in that crowd or even themselves. So now, look who was in that crowd. You had Cliven in that crowd. You had all the Bundy. I was in that crowd. All right? Aren't we all called unindicted co-conspirators? Well, in the first trial, the prosecution was able to get the witnesses stricken because Steve Myrie, the prosecution, called us all unindicted co-conspirators in an ongoing investigation, and we cannot be trusted. All right? But now, the crowd is not, according to them, just so they can keep to separate these defendants from the rest of the crowd. In other words, these defendants were acting totally on their own, and they were not trying to defend anybody. All right? It is so convoluted, it gets so ridiculous, it just makes your eyes roll around in your head. I got there a little bit late, but I guess I really didn't miss anything. The jury's questions were fantastic. My favorite one, absolutely, hands down, my favorite one was a jury question to Joel Willis, the FBI agent that put all the Facebook, all the communication evidence together. And he was asked if he basically doctored any of the pictures. Was there any photo manipulation like that? Well, that goes directly to the fact that the jury just simply does not trust the prosecution. There's a very, very narrow focus on Eric Parker and the Jersey barrier, what the BLM could actually see, where he was actually pointing, or even could possibly point. Now, I said it, was it the lunch break, or no, it was, it was at the lunch break, that at the very most, he would have a 30-degree angle. And he'd come up with 25 degrees. But the problem is, the broomstick that they put through there is 30 degrees off from where the BLM was actually standing. I think the defense is really setting the prosecution up for this one, because they have laid the groundwork to make them look, the federal government look very, very silly. The groundwork being simply this: Eric Parker's barrel was still about a foot short and actually protruding out the backside of that Jersey barrier. All right, so if you do laterally move it any at all, rather than pointing directly down that opening, you're going to shoot concrete. You're not going to hit, I mean, you probably blow yourself up, I don't know, ricochet or something right in your face. So, this is so obvious. I actually talked to, hey, listen, you know what? I'll go out there and take pictures if you want me to. But it sounds like, for some reason, I always have a problem right here when I'm leaving. So, But that is amazing. That is amazing. I went out there and actually a little bit nervous. I didn't take, because I have the same exact rifle that Eric Parker has, just a different caliber. Well, I thought about getting on a bridge and poking my rifle down through that Jersey bear, and I thought, you know, that's probably not a good idea. Any law enforcement officer sees that, I'm pretty sure I would have got arrested. So I didn't do it. But it's impossible to cant that rifle to get the proper angle from that position to even be able to point at the BLM they keep talking about. I truly believe that's what's one of the things that's going to come out. Almost all of the questions, by far most of the questions, revolve this last set of questions at least. I think there was about a dozen of them. All point to that question. What could Eric Parker see? Could he actually have pointed the firearm if he really wanted to? This is fantastic in my opinion. It just shows that they're not buying into the government's narrative. You remember what the judge said? If a law enforcement officer can even see a firearm, you have, during the performance of his duties, you have assaulted him. Well, obviously they're not buying into that. They want to know if he was actually pointing that rifle at the Bureau of Land Management. Some of the other questions I think really go to assist and aid the other defendants. For example, Ricky Loveland, one of the questions was, do you have any video or pictures of Ricky Loveland pointing his firearm at any time at any law enforcement officers? On the stand, Special Agent Joel Willis said, no, don't got it. Doesn't exist. All right? And there's similar questions that go to the other two defendants, Scott Drexler and Stephen Stewart. In fact, there was one that lumped those two together and said, is there any of that evidence whatsoever that those two pointed firearms directly at law enforcement? So they don't care that those firearms were visible to law enforcement when they were there. That's gone nowhere. That is so obvious from these questions. It's gone nowhere. So seriously, the judge, she's looking like she's starting to have a meltdown. They're all looking, the prosecution's really looking nervous. You know, I caught one little thing. I have this hearing aid type thing when I'm in there. I can pick up whispers like you wouldn't believe. One of the comments by Steve Myrie was when one of their witnesses made a certain statement, and that particular statement had to do with what I just mentioned, if there is any pictures whatsoever. And it was basically cussing. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but basically cussing under his breath. I picked that up. You can pick that up, those sort of things up with those earpieces. Amazing. I don't even know if they know that. But it's like eavesdropping when you get right down to it. So that's